I'm here this morning, but you'll probably be watching it in the evening, with Felicity Flutter, who is a watercolor artist, and she uses pencil as well. So I'm just going to quickly share the screen before we start with Felicity's page in the ART360 Edition 3 magazine. So you will all know where you can contact her, and you can read a little bit more about her in there. So I'm just going to do that for you. Share. Here we go. Here's the beautiful magazine. I'll take it back to the cover so everyone can see the cover. So that's what you're looking for, and it is under the ART360 tab on the Pure website. Go to magazine, click on there, and you will find the magazine. Easy to flick through, everything is dynamic, and as you roll over the items, you can see that they're all interactive, so you can just click through. Felicity is a member, so you could just click here on page 6 and it will take you straight to Felicity's page. Look at that, how clever is that? Thank you, Hildegard Pax, for making all this so simple for all of us. So there's a little bit more you can read about Felicity there and her inspiration, and all her contact details are down the left hand side. So you've got her email, her website address, Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. So follow all our artists on Instagram, because you'll really start to get to know more about them, because they share a lot about their practice and what they're doing, as well as sometimes putting up some very lovely little offers, but you have to be watching to see them. So yeah, there's Felicity, and you're inspired very much by nature, aren't you, Felicity? So you're in our nature section. There we go. So if anyone is interested in reading more about that kind of inspiration and the artists that are also inspired by nature, then it is this section in the magazine from page 16 that you're looking for. And actually also on the back cover we have a piece of work by Felicity Flutter, which is called Breaking Point.
It is.
Yeah, beautiful, a beautiful piece. And we were like, that is just, it's just the right thing to kind of like end the whole journey on as you go through the magazine. So yeah, no, beautiful piece. And also you were one of our judges' choices, weren't you? So let's just go back to our judges' pages. So at the beginning of the magazine, and you were selected as Tavish Khan, the art critics, top selection, yourself, Shulan Wang and Louisa. I think we can see Tavish's taste, can't we? His aesthetic taste.
Black and white.
From his selection, and also fine detail. I think he obviously really, the fine detail and being able to really observe. I mean, what's he said about yours? The paintings of waves by Felicity capture the energy, yet are also so calming, as if you could stroll right into them and feel the water lapping at your bare feet. They are really evocative, really evocative. You really do. I think the realistic representational style that you have really does pull the viewer in. But I think we're going to hear a bit more about that. Let's stop sharing that and let's hear directly from you, Felicity. Tell us, first of all, why did you move from being a graphic designer into fine art?
I think that when I started a family, I was finding that actually getting paid was quite a big issue. And I remember sitting in one client's office and saying, I'm going to stay here all night unless you pay me.
Oh my goodness.
I know. And so he did actually give in and pay me, because I don't think he really fancied leaving me there in his office all night. But kind of after that, I thought, well, actually it would be easier to paint and, hand your painting over and receive some money for it. Well, this was my ideal in my head. It doesn't always work like that, does it? But it did work to start with. So yes, definitely. I found
so it was that whole corporate thing of being a freelance and having to manage your own funding and money and chasing clients. It was easier to actually be doing something you really, really loved.
Yes. I mean, I still love graphics, and it is incredibly useful to be able to do it. Like producing my own posters and so on, invites and all that. So, as a background, I think it's very useful, and I think it shows up in my work.
Yeah, Yeah, in your very representational style. So you were motivated really part of your life journey to transition from being in that kind of more corporate career into something that was more in your passion, but bringing the skills across. Why, therefore, did you then choose the medium of watercolor and pencil? What was it about those two?
Well, the watercolor definitely came first, and because I had two stepdaughters and then a daughter, and space is another thing, isn't it? So watercolors actually don't take up as much room. I quite like the idea of doing pastels, but you've got to spread them out. Oil painting, it smells a bit. And yes, I had a little room off the dining room, so I think oil paints might have sort of impacted our lives a bit more. So I chose watercolor. I went to classes, and it just took off from there. And I think after about a year or so, she said, "I can't teach you anymore. Go away."
Where did you go? Locally, or did you go further
it was just a little class in Staplehurst. So yes, but it got me going. Yes.
So was it a group of artists?
Yes, and I made it as a good friend there as well, and she kept on sort of nudging me and saying, "How do I do this?" and whatever. And she wasn't too keen when I left because I'd been helping her as well.
Yeah. So is that something that you really like? Is the continual learning and evolving your practice?
Yes, I think you do, don't you? It's new materials come out, and there's so much more to play with now. Yes, and watercolor in particular is definitely a learning curve, isn't it? I mean, I know that you've tried it.
I have tried it. I have tried every medium because I think it's important that I understand the pain that you all go through. And I have to say, the lovely Carol who taught me, Carol Mitchell, so much patience, because honestly, you look at it, it's so innocuous, isn't it? Watercolor paint, you get this lovely little palette and a pencil, a paintbrush and some water, and you think, how can that be so scary? And yet you put the water with the paint and the paintbrush, and the whole thing is, you have to be, I can see why it works for someone who's graphic design, because there is a lot of process.
Yes.
A lot of technique.
Yes. Yeah. But I mean, there are different techniques as well. Mine is I put lots and lots of translucent layers on, and then I draw into it, and then I add a paint on as well, but more of that later. But yes.
So I mean, where did the pencils come from then? Why did you suddenly decide, I'm going to try putting bring pencil into this medium?
When I started doing the seascapes, I started thinking, well, how can I do this differently from how anybody else is doing it? And I sort of looked online, found out, I had a look at what other people were doing with seascapes and waves in particular. And I mean, most of them were acrylics or oils. I wouldn't say that watercolor is a particularly easy way of painting waves. And I actually found it easier to draw as well as paint into it. It just added another layer. And I think that the greyness of graphite also added a sort of slightly English grey to it all. So it just, and nobody else seemed to be mixing the two. So it was, I thought, right, I'll try that. That's the way to go. And it seemed to work, so off I went.
So that's interesting, because Carol Berry, who I was interviewing yesterday, mentioned this. She has an idea, a bit of an inspiration, a thought, and then she goes off and researches other artists who have worked in that area. So she was talking about Van Gogh, because she obviously does a lot to do with nature. Was there any particular artist that you found inspirational when you were doing your research element?
Some photographers, I think, but I like the way they photographed the waves. So that was a start, trying to get a lower perspective on things. So you get the drama. But apart from that, no, I mean, I've been to so many exhibitions and looked at so many artists, and I just think nowadays you can look at so much work online. Actually, you kind of end up with your head in a spin a little bit. So actually picking out any particular artist as an influence, there probably isn't one. and I try not to get too influenced by any one particular painter, I think.
That's interesting, the comment you made there about watching online and getting your head in a spin. Also, I think that the colours aren't realistic, are they, online? Whereas if you go to a real life exhibition, you not only get the smell, I love that smell of the paint, of the medium that people have used, but you also get the true colour according to how your brain has calibrated colour. Whereas when you're looking on screen, you're getting how the screen is calibrated and then how your brain has calibrated the colour as well.
Yes. And size is the other thing, isn't it?
Yeah, scale.
Yeah, and I saw an artist last weekend, and he said, "Oh, I didn't bother to go to that exhibition up at the Mel Galleries because it's all online now." So I looked through it, but it isn't the same.
No.
Actually, I quite like to look through online. You know, if like the Mel, all the paintings are up there, so that I've already familiarised myself with them, and know I can look out for something in particular. But then when I get up there into the actual exhibition, I'm just sort of amazed that I might find something different that actually didn't necessarily work as an image online.
Yeah.
And it was seeing the marks as well, isn't it?
Yeah. It's not just color, it's the intimacy of the marks that you see in real life. You're absolutely right. How many of us have done that, ordered something on Amazon thinking it was massive, and it comes and it's like the tiniest thing, and you're like so disappointed. I thought that was huge, and it's arrived tiny. And the same with art. I mean, going both ways, you can think something's huge and you don't want it, and then when you actually see it in real life, it's actually of a scale that's right for the environment that you were thinking about. So yes, I think the hybrid, which is what you've just discussed, is a really interesting way now. I think everyone needs to have the opportunity to access things online, but there's absolutely no way of replicating the assault on the senses, and emotionally, of being in a room with art that has been made by humans.
Yes. I mean, the other worry, isn't it, that with all these online submissions, that people and the selectors are not actually seeing the actual thing, sometimes not at all. So, you know, they're missing out on subtleties of a lot of work. So
I absolutely agree. It is really helpful to have the opportunity to do both, to go in the real world and see things. But I think there's a place for both of them.
That's absolutely.
And that's interesting. You just mentioned mark making again, and that's something I wanted to kind of like just explore with you a little bit more, because you've got a very subtle mark making, unlike Carol, who I was saying when I was chatting to you yesterday, which is very dynamic and very obvious. Your mark making is very subtle. Is that something that you found right at the beginning, or is that something that's kind of evolved as you've practiced and grown your art practice?
I think I've always sort of drawn in detail really from a young age, and definitely belonging to the Society of Graphic Fine Art actually got me back into drawing. All the time I was painting landscapes or whatever it was, 20 years, I didn't have a sketchbook at all, and I didn't go out drawing. But once I'd found the SGFA and realised that I needed to do sketchbooks to get in, I sort of went at it like a demon, really. Got in, and then since then, it's a lot. It's a go-to thing to do, I think, if you're depressed or I don't know, you can't think what you're going to do next. Just go and do a little drawing.
Yeah.
And it's fabulous. It's just a wonderful thing to have, a wonderful skill to acquire, sketchbooks.
Yeah, so sketchbooks are now a kind of fundamental part of your inspiration process, are they?
Yes, partly. I do skies in my sketchbook quite a bit, because trying them out. That's another one that's sort of about the quickest thing I can do is a sky. So I like to do those. But yes, but not total inspiration for doing my my waves. I think just being down there on the beach is the inspiration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the sketchbooks are more of a kind of warm-up technique.
Yes, I think so.
Get you in the zone.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that because everyone needs a way in, don't they?
They do. Yes.
It's like waking up in the morning. You need a way into your day, and we all have like these little habit routines that we don't appreciate. They're our warm-up to the day.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what you use the sketchbooks for. That's interesting.
Yeah.
What other things do you use to inspire you? Do you use photography?
Yes, obviously I couldn't really do this without that. And I go down to the beach, and I have my camera on repeat exposure, and I probably take a couple of 100 photos at least, and I might only get 3 or 4 paintings out of that session, or sometimes less. Sometimes it just doesn't work. I've got my hood over, and it's absolutely blowing a gale, and actually standing still is quite tricky with the camera.
Yeah, because you need it to be blustery, don't you? It's no good having a calm day.
Yes, yeah, and the wind's got to be in the right direction. For the waves, it's got to be high tide, and hopefully with the sun coming in and out.
Yeah.
So yes, I try to. Do you have
a beach of choice?
Yes, I go down to Rye Harbour and to Cliff End at Pett. So those are my locally, and I can get down there in 15 minutes or so. So to Rye Harbour, which is brilliant. Yeah, so that's my place to go. But I've got a tide times clock in my hall, so I keep an eye on that. So if I know it's going to be windy, and if it's low tide in the middle of the day or whatever, and it's pouring with rain, well, obviously that's no good. So yes, it's getting all the elements together. So and you never know whether it's going to be a successful trip or not, really. And then I come back, get all the photos up on the computer, and look at them, and actually sort of zoom in. So probably I've got quite a big scene, and I zoom in and think, oh my goodness, look at that. That's brilliant. But on the series, I then might think, well, actually that wave next to it or behind it is not that interesting. But in the next shot, there's a little bit there in the foreground. That's interesting. So I start dragging bits around and playing in Photoshop. I suppose that's a bit like sort of sketching it out, isn't it? But I'm actually doing it on the computer because I can. Yeah. And then I kind of find out what works. And sometimes I will get rid of the background and just put a plain background in, like Breaking Point. That background wasn't with that. The sky wasn't with the wave. So yes, so playing around with that, and then I print that out and work from that. But then as I'm painting, I will also change things. I mean, that's the nature of it, isn't it? It's what you should be doing. Well, putting your own input into it, not just copying the photo. That's the
beauty of being an artist, isn't it? It's what you want to put on the page. You have absolute power.
Yes, yeah. I mean, a lot of the ones I like doing now are the ones with the sort of stormy sky behind, but actually they're not necessarily like that. They might actually have sea behind that wave, to the horizon. Once I took the horizon out, and it just gives more drama to the whole scene, as if you're sort of lower down and the wave's almost above you.
Yeah, I'm looking at the one behind you, here to the right-hand side, that's got you're almost this one here, just above the plug, that where you've got the heater plugged in, just there. It almost looks like you're in the wave, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. Again, that I think did have a horizon. It doesn't now.
Yeah, and you've put a bit of colour in there.
Whoops.
Oh, lost your headphones.
Lost my earphones. Turning round wasn't a good idea.
No. So you put a bit of colour in that one.
Yes, that was there. But I think I probably emphasised it a little bit more for drama. But it was just a fantastic evening, and the sunlight was actually, catching. It was you could see the sunset, the light of the sunset through the waves.
And is the colour in there pencil, or is that the watercolour?
Oh, that's all watercolour, yes.
It's all watercolour.
Yeah. Anything that's sort of greyish might have a bit of pencil in it, but the colour is all watercolour.
So you spent a lot of time watching the tide clock and nipping off to Rye Harbour, but I know you've done some residencies as well. You did a residency recently with Louisa, and you're going to do another one with Sue Scollard. Can you tell us about that, how you found those residencies, actually to initiate them, and then the experience of the residencies?
Well, I haven't actually done it yet because it kept on being put off. No, so it's been put off at least twice. So hopefully it's going to be next March.
Okay, and that's the one
so
with
that's
Sue.
That one. That's in Cornwall. That's with Sue and Louisa. And then I belong to a group called the Wilderness Art Collective, and we're doing field studies next autumn. And so hopefully, you know, most of the members will take part, and it's going to be a week of things going on all around the country. And I've set hours up for 4 of us from the group, and we're going to be down at Rye Harbour. Yeah.
So have they got a website, Wilderness Art Collective?
They do, yes. Yeah.
I'm just looking that up so we can show people. How did you find them? How did you find the Wilderness Art Collective? There
was an artist who called Polly, who took part in the Cranbrook Art Show, and she belonged. And we went off, Louisa and I went off to an exhibition up at the Royal Geographic Society in London to see her work there. And we were just fascinated by the group. They're a very varied group, you know, it's not just painters. I'm
just going to share their
installation artists, all sorts really.
Yeah, I'm going to share their website so people can see what we're talking about. So this is it. So you can become a member, a friend of this collective. But I just saw on there, look at that. As you say, multidisciplinary, broad range from painting, drawing, sculpture, installation, writing. So you've become a member of that collective, have you?
Yes, I'm an associate member. Yeah. I mean, I became a member really just not long before COVID hit. So unfortunately, you know, since then, we haven't had many meetings, you know, to actually get to know people. We did go up to London and meet one of the artists who had an exhibition up in London. But the others, you know, have yet to meet. We've met them on Zoom. But yes, so.
And do you find being member of these kind of things, so I know you're a member of Pure, and then you're a member of the Wilderness, and you're a member of SGFA. Do you find those memberships really important to your art career?
Yes, yeah. It pulls me out of my comfort zone. And again, it sort of, I think it influences the way you're thinking, doesn't it? So yes, definitely. And you know, it's being able to talk to like-minded people. But they're both very diverse groups, you know, the members. So yeah, no, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I think it's really important to find groups that can underpin your inspiration and also show you just a different view, a different world view. They've had different experiences, haven't they?
Yeah.
You
know, I wouldn't want to be in a group that was all sort of representational artists, because I need to see a broader range of art, really, than just what I'm doing. Yes,
because as you say, it's better to see it in real life and then let it just kind of by osmosis absorb into your practice, but it's not apparent. You know, it's like, oh, that's exactly what XYZ does.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, you know, even if you're looking at things and you think, oh, I really love that, and then you move on to something else or whatever, but it's in there in your head, isn't it? Yeah. And it gets absorbed into what you're doing. And I mean, I've just got so many things sort of buzzing around in my head, really, that, you know, which way to go next, really. Yeah.
So your style is very representational. Would you ever consider trying something quite abstract?
I have tried a number of times and it doesn't really happen in the way I want it to happen. I think I just don't see things that way, probably, myself. And then I just get bogged down with details, and, you know.
That's just your way. We're all individual personalities, aren't we? We all have our tendencies, and this is...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what about medium? You know, you use particular types of paper, and you've just talked about, you know, using watercolor and pencil. Have you ever explored trying other medium?
I'd love to try pastels, because I mean, that's a bit like drawing, you know, it's drawing, isn't it, really? I'm not sure the pastel artist would say that. No, we paint with pastels.
Mm.
And I did do oil painting at art college, so sometimes. So I have tried a few, yes, and of course I've done screen printing as well, and I did a bit of etching. So I have tried quite a few things, but it's the time, isn't it, to do all these things. I really wanted to carry on with the screen printing, but the place that I was doing it in Hastings closed down, so kind of that was that. And the nearest other place that I could go to was a long way, so I unfortunately gave it up. But no, I did enjoy that, and it was nice to do something different for a while. I mean, that was alongside my watercolor painting, but yeah, no, I enjoyed that.
Printers are a particular type of character as well. I find, having interviewed a lot of artists, each kind of group, printmakers, painters, watercolor artists, you all have your kind of personality tendencies. So you can see, oh yes, once you've had a little chat for a while, you're like, oh yes, I can see why that is your preferred medium. And painters, again, you know, and printmakers are very process orientated, I find.
Yeah, which suits me fine.
Yeah.
I think the one I might try, if and when I ever get the time, is colograph. So
yeah, well, tonight, live tonight, so we're actually recording this on the 4th of November, although people will be watching this later in the month. But it's Brenda Hartell.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously Brenda is the guru of the colograph.
Absolutely, yeah.
And she is quite local, so you could go and have a chat with her about that.
Oh, I've had her chats with.
You've had
Brenda,
many chats.
Yes, I love her work. Yes.
Yeah.
I do have a small piece of hers. So, yeah.
Well, she is one of the people doing our ArtVent event. So some of her work will be in the ArtVent calendars. So if people are interested in Brenda's work, that's definitely in there. So just to kind of like wrap it all up, because it's been fascinating listening about that journey and listening about how you get inspired and how you go in and the places that you like to visit to get that inspiration. Once you've got your piece finished, I can see behind you quite a varied range of different framing outcomes. So you've got white, you've got grey. Most of them have got the white border. How did you because I get asked this a lot, framing advice, not just from artists, but from clients as well who've bought a piece of unframed work. What drives the decision on how ultimately you frame your work?
I would always use a white mount. And I think that really that's the accepted good practice now. Especially if you're hanging in an exhibition or gallery with other people, and they've got coloured mounts and very bright frames or something, it's very difficult for the curator to hang. I've kept my frames quite neutral, and you can see that side, that side up in that corner there. That is a sort of off-white sort of type of textured frame, and then I moved to the paler grey ones, which are up the top there.
Yeah.
And now much more charcoaly coloured.
Yeah.
So yes, I moved to the darker charcoal one because the paler grey one, I think, he was going to stop being able to obtain it.
Okay.
I moved to the darker one, but I don't know whether I think it may still be available. But actually, once I tried the darker one, I really quite liked that.
Really makes the pictures pop, I will say. They really just like stand out from the wall with the charcoal grey. I completely understand what you're saying about being considerate about hanging within a group exhibition with other artists. You're absolutely right. When you're considering your framing, you want something that has personality, that stands out as your work, so your particular frame style, but also you have to be considerate of not jarring. You want people to notice your artwork.
Do, yeah.
Not the colour of the mount.
Absolutely, yeah.
Unless the colour of the mount is an integral part of the artwork.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's true, yeah.
So, yeah, it is we've had lots of conversations, especially after when you're doing big hangs of like 400 or 500 pieces of work. for a curator, that can be quite a headache when people come in with it's different sizes of work and then different colours, frames and different colour mounts. It can be quite a headache because you want to take people on a journey. So no, that's interesting that you do think about that. Thank you. Thank you from all the curators in the world.
Shall I say a bit about what the paper I use?
Yeah, that'd be great if you can tell us about the paper you use.
I use Fabriano Artistico Knot, which is cold pressed, and it has a very slight texture. I mean, some people would have thought I would have used something smoother, but actually I like the way that the watercolor sort of pools in the little in the paper. So that has always worked for me very well. But I recommend that anybody who's starting out, you need to try out lots of different brands of paper, because we're all different and we all find our special paper that works best for us, I think.
Do you have a supplier of choice that you go to get different papers to try?
I go to Jackson's mostly to get my supplies online. I have been into one of their shops, which is like going into a sweetie shop, isn't it?
Yeah. And what about paints? Do you have a particular type of paint?
Well, I use Winsor & Newton mostly, but lately I've been using some Daniel Smith ones, and they've brought out some fantastic greys. And they've actually and they have a signature series which has been formulated with some leading artists. Joseph Zbukvich and Alvaro Castagay have worked in collaboration with Daniel Smith, and I use these in my monochrome type paintings, but I also use them in the coloured ones. I mean, they have warm greys, cool greys, all sorts of, and they're fabulous, really sort of creamy paints. And Schminke, I use some of those as well. So it's a bit of a mixture. Yes, I mean, perhaps I should show you my painting station.
Yes, yeah, let's see your painting station.
I'll unplug just a minute, and I think I should be able to carry it over.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Can you see?
Yes. Again, all very monochrome. It's all so beautiful. So beautiful.
Try and get down to this.
Yeah.
So that's all my sort of painting mess and my brushes and everything. I'm a bit of an angle, aren't I?
Yeah, that's good. Over the top is good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is you definitely have a very distinctive color palette that you stick to. Although you've said you're going on this wilderness collective nature thing. I'll be really intrigued to see how that influences your color palette.
Yes. Yeah. We shall see.
We'll see.
Well, I mean, my palette used to be greens, when I was doing landscapes. So I prefer blue as a color, I have to say.
You're even wearing kind of your grey colour palette.
Yes, that's true. Yes. Yeah, but I have put some red on.
Yeah, good. Well done. Well done. Well, thank you so much, Flick. It's been really fascinating. And are there any other tips you'd like to just leave artists with before you finish?
Yeah, there's one other thing that about stretching paper. So what I do with my paper is I put it in a big tray and soak it for a minute or so. And then I hold the paper up and let it drip. And then I have a towel and I put it on the towel, fold the towel over the top just to get off the excess water. And then I place it on a board and put the tape, that brown paper tape. I wet the tape and then I run it through my fingers to get off again the excess water. Tape it down, put another towel on top, and then I put a board on top of that and some books, and I leave it overnight. And for me, it really works. Fabriano isn't the easiest paper to stretch, but that's the way I do it. And that's the way that has worked for ages for me.
It just reminds me of being a teenager and trying to stretch your jeans to your own shape and sitting in the bath. And again, it's like that process, isn't it? It's like,
yes, absolutely.
You've got to go through the process of almost letting the paper kind of like relax.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And leave it to dry of its own accord under all those books, and it just flattens it perfectly.
But you lose any of that texture, the bite that you were talking about?
No, absolutely. No, you don't. No.
Oh, that's amazing. There you are, everyone who's listening. That is the secret method of stretching your paper. You heard it here first. Quite a process. And then when you paint, so you were saying, I've got one more question, because I'm fascinated always about the process. When you say you do lots and lots and lots of translucent layers, do you leave it to dry between each one of those for quite a while, or do you do that quite rapidly, the translucent layers?
I use a hairdryer.
There you go.
Yep.
A lot of artists use hairdryers, actually.
Yep. Well, sometimes I don't want it to dry too quickly because I want to keep dropping more paint in.
Yeah.
I think you see there's where is it? That's probably
that way.
Up that way. Sorry.
Yeah.
That way.
Yeah.
That one. It's got some really dark skies.
Yes, it has. It's got a dark line, hasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that took me 3 days to do that sky.
Wow.
And
yeah,
there was a lot of colour dropped into that.
And you need the previous layer to still, you can't hear me now, can you? Because you've lost your earphones. You need the previous layer to still be wet, don't you? As you drop that colour in.
Yeah, and if you just keep quickly on dropping more and more paint in, and that got that depth of colour in it. But there are other times when I just want to layer colour after colour, and they're all kind of showing through each other really, and they build up how you want it to the colour you want to achieve at the end. I can't, when I mix colours, it's always been intuitive for me, mixing colours. And if people ask, what are you using, whatever, I can't really explain because it just comes from the heart, and it kind of always has done. So I've been no use as a teacher.
So it shows that like with printmaking, often when you're creating the final print, they keep a kind of like a recipe of all the colours they've used, whereas you're saying you're quite the reverse, that you are very intuitive and just keep adding them and you wouldn't actually know at the end. No,
it just sort of seems to happen.
I rest my case. There is a personality for each medium. And you are the personality, absolutely, for that method, because you have to be able to not be so controlled.
Yeah,
about it. It's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you for sharing so many top tips. People will be going off and doing their water and bath and towels and everything with their paper now.
It's always a white towel.
Always, yes, because oh my goodness, could you imagine you do all that and then you suddenly get a hue? Well, I suppose it could be one of the translucent layers, couldn't it? Yeah. Use a green towel and it's not colour fast. That could be quite awkward. Thank you so much, Flick. It's absolutely fascinating. Thank you for sharing all of those really invaluable tips and ideas, and also for expressing how you have to be, as an artist, sometimes you have to be conscious of the other people that you will be interacting with further down the chain as you start to interact and show your work. That's really important to think about, everyone else who's involved in that chain,
especially at open exhibitions.
And being someone who has been involved as an organizer for Southeast Open Studios and for the Cranbrook show, this from first-hand experience, being on the other side.
Definitely, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Lesley. Lovely to chat to you again.
Yeah, well, on screen.
Yes.
It's quite nice that we do actually see each other in real life as well.
Well, see you on November the 7th.
And I'll see you on Sunday. Yeah, absolutely. At the private view. We're now doing real life private views and showing work in real life, which is just a joy. Although I was saying to someone this morning, it's actually exhausting, isn't it? Because now we're doing all this stuff on screen and all this stuff in real life. And it's kind of doubled everything. But hey, we're making it work.
Yeah.
All right, you take care. Thank you so much. Thank you.